Hi, welcome to the Biomimicry Works podcast. I'm Peter and this is Dr. Nicolene, and we're going to be looking at lots of different things to do with Biomimicry Works, as well as exploring some of our creative works and talking all things inspirational about biomimicry, education, and different ways of creating.
Hi, Peter. Yeah, I'm so excited that we are finally having this podcast. And I think there is just no better time than now with the winter solstice here in South Africa. And I think for you also in Australia, because we're both in the South, to just kind of spiral in and prepare the soil, prepare the ground, prepare just all the background about what on earth are we talking about when we talk about Biomimicry Works.
And I think speaking about Earth, if we go back to Earth Day, which seems like many moons ago now, we first opened up the Biomimicry Works community. And at that stage, it was just you and I who had created this platform, and we have our Instagram, we have our LinkedIn, and we hadn't really put our faces to Biomimicry Works. And since opening up that community platform, we're now seeing, I think there's 113 people on that platform now, which I think is really interesting. I think that's a really interesting representation of how appropriate and how relevant it is that people are seeking a different way of being able to attach their profession, attach their persona to nature, and to be able to say, yes, I'm an advocate for nature, but I also want to go a little bit deeper in terms of content, deeper in terms of specialization, and deeper in terms of connection with other people from all around the world.
Yeah, I think what really stands out for me, or what really resonates for me, is the communication part. So as Biomimicry Works kind of evolved and found its own identity, there was a big piece about communication. And this really made me also think about traditional ways of communicating. You know, we're so used to either speaking or writing to communicate our messages. But I think what I've really came to discover for myself, and as I'm learning about the people in the community, is that there is such a diverse way to communicate, and it's almost as if we're learning to communicate even with silence. That even silence is such an interesting way to communicate. Yesterday, I said to my son, we went outside, and I said, "Oh my gosh, like look at the landscape. Everything has just gone brown." And we arrived back in South Africa about 3 months ago, and everything was green. But even while we were sleeping, things have just changed constantly, slowly, in its own way. And nature is just constantly communicating in so many beautiful, subtle ways. And I think Biomimicry Works has kind of mimicked this in a very interesting way.
Yeah, I think, well, Biomimicry Works is just an extension of me and an extension of you. And in the busyness of everything, it's still holding that intention of creating. And that's something where, since we've known each other and all the professional endeavors that we've been on, it really is about that creative impulse. We don't really know what's going to happen next or how it's going to turn out, but we know that feeling and that intention to create. And I think coming underneath the full moon, as you said, it's really that impulse to communicate, to share in many different ways. If I reflect on how we first started Biomimicry Works until now, it really has evolved into something quite interesting, where a lot of people will say, so what does Biomimicry Works really do? And the answer is always diversity, and the answer is always inclusivity. And if you look on the Instagram, it communicates in a particular way, and it magnetizes in a particular way too, where people will DM, they'll message, and they'll just seek some sort of connection or willingness to help. And then you'll see people who will go to the website and they'll see the videos and they'll see, can I be involved with this community? And they'll click on the link and they'll come into the community and they'll answer the set questions. And then you'll have that little period of, just as you said before, a little bit of silence.
Mm,
And if you imagine being in a room with 113 people and there's just stillness and silence, and
mm,
who's going to talk first? Or and what we find is, it's really interesting to see that there are some very active people, and there are people who are just have that initial impulse and then just kind of fade away into the background. But you can't discount anyone. And this is why this next iteration of communication through this podcast is going to be going through as many people in the community as possible and just sharing story. And really, at the core essence of what biomimicry works is, it is sharing a narrative, it's sharing a story which is not predetermined and or predefined.
mm,
It is an emerging, evolving story. It is a real gift to be able to tell a story through your relationship with nature, how you apply that to your personal life, how you apply that to your professional life, and is there a way that you can weave those two together? And I think nature is just the key, as always.
yeah, two really big things come up for me. One is fear of scarcity as a very big kind of overarching topic, and the second thing is identity. And I think let's quickly talk more about fear of scarcity in terms of biomimicry works. So this is a big one. I think every time we go into conversation with people, there is this notion to kind of push biomimicry into some sort of space where it's like, how does it make money? Who makes the money? How can I make the money? Does it cost money? It's all around the fear of scarcity topic, and it's been really interesting to say to people, well, the the fear of scarcity shouldn't shut down any opportunities or any possibilities, and that kind of relates into identity. I think what we've seen in this big beautiful room of 113 people is a cocoon. We've seen the borrowing, like borrow into the ground. We've seen hibernating. We've seen the winter. We've seen the curling up. We've seen the almost like, okay, who am I in this big group of people, and can I be part of the group if I can't contribute or gain in a commodity way? Like what happens when nobody tells me what to do? Um, this has just been so interesting for me, because even putting out the biomimicry works and saying we rely on natural intelligence, we rely on decentralization of power, of communication, of everything, that it's an open slate for connection and communication to happen. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but this has been, I think, the craziest part of the journey, because even the fact that we are just slowly going with the rhythms and the cycles and saying, okay, well, we're going to go to the podcast now. And we're just like really putting our feelers everywhere. And I can say it's super uncomfortable for me, but still being willing to go there and not kind of crumble under, um, that fear that people have of not being able to fully define where does it fit into an economic kind of box, right?
Mm.
But to really trust the natural flow of the process. Like, this has been really something. I don't know if you found it in some conversations.
Yeah, for sure. I think, just touching on the word process there,
Mm,
creativity is a process, and biomimicry works is an emerging process.
mm,
So, therefore, it's a little bit confusing for people. There's no predetermined path, as I said before, there's no predefinition of what it will be. And that's by conscious design, because we don't know what lives and breathes within people within the community. And we've seen through iteration 1 of our magazine, now
mm,
iteration 2 of our magazine, You cannot plan for that. So I cannot have a conversation with someone and say, okay, so tell me exactly what biomimicry works will be. I can tell you what's happening now. And this is why the narrative is so important. It's so important to tell the emerging story of what Biomimicry Works is as a community and also what it is as a business, because it is also a business. It's a registered business here in Australia. We work as consultants, we work as social media agencies, we work doing projects. So there is a component of business to what we do. The component of business to what we do, hopefully that increases over time, therefore that can feed into the communal aspect of it, because all of this takes time, resources, and money as well. So in order to be a sustainable system, not even a regenerative system, to be a sustainable system, we have to look at it from a business model, but not from a traditional business model. And we kind of flip that around. That's kind of our tendency, is to go all into the, let's say, philanthropic way, or to the generosity way, and open spaces for people. And that's what we like to do. That's how we create.
Yeah.
And by definition, that is inclusive. And then when you get into that interplay with people, you quickly see the dynamics of human nature emerge. And you'll see those people who have been just waiting for someone to open a space for them to be like, "Oh, okay." And I'm, specifically thinking about Byron Garcia, from Natural Designs over there in Oregon, and who will get on here. And he's been such a key uh, figure, and such an unbelievable supporter as well, who is just so ready to share. So the last
I
thing I want to say before I just hand
mm,
it over to you is what I feel it's about leading through creating.
mm,
And leading is not about gaining as many followers as possible. Leading is about going into something which is uncertain, it's new territory, and nobody can tell you how it is that you are going to do that, because you have that inner ability to lead from that real essence of your relationship to nature, how it is that you've had these experiences over time, and how they inform you with what you do with product, with people, and with purpose.
I like that. Sorry, I just like wanted to jump in there because the school community really created this very interesting hub of people, right? Like you're referring to community, then you're referring to the school platform where all of these people who are interested in biomimicry, and some are very high level practitioners, and some people are just super curious and just want to be part of a space. Um, which I think is really cool because that community is interrelated, it's interdependent, it is decentralized once again, it is a hive, right? And you can come to the hive, you can network, you can learn, you can inspire, you can contribute. And I think this is a missing piece for people at the moment, because no bee goes to the hive and just sits. Like everybody has a job and they are constantly buzzing, and they're in and out and they're doing their thing, and they go out to fetch the pollen, and they come back and they make honey, and they feed the queen, and they do everything, but everything is for the hive, right? So I think there's still this missing part in biomimicry works where it's very, I don't know, as if people want or assume that it should be a very traditional way of somebody being the leader, but actually within the biomimicry works school community, it is really mimicking that open space for sharing and contributing. And there are some, like you've mentioned, Byron, super organisms within this community, like Diksha and Kiara, um, that we've come to know, and yeah, I don't know what you think about the community aspect within school, and how that kind of came about as a separate extension of the business side of things.
Well, I'll talk about it in terms of where I would like it to go. Where I'd like it to go is that Biomimicry Works becomes this regenerative design studio where community members can come in and they can be utilized across different projects. We can really look at networking and having partnerships and saying, yes, you know, I'll speak for myself. I'm not formally trained in biomimicry. I haven't gone and done a degree at a university. I'm an educator. I've founded educational initiatives. I'm a creator. I know how to do all sorts of wonderful design things, and I'm a good communicator. And I have a deep, deep relationship with nature, which nobody can take away from me. And all of those things together make up me, who I am. So everything that I do, Biomimicry Works included, is an extension of me. And I come back to that again. So all of these relationships that are happening or have happened is a consequence of what you and I have done from a non-egotistical point of view, from simply creating and leading and opening up this space. So if you imagine, when you're speaking about hives, then it's a wonderful thing to watch when a new queen is born and the hive swarms and there's absolute entropy, there's absolute chaos. And slowly but surely, the hive splits and half of the hive go with the new queen and the other half remain. And it's a really, really interesting phenomena when you create in an environment that has been so, I guess, solidified in a way with the institutes and all of these other entities in the biomimicry space for many, many years now. When you have a new queen, let's say, in terms of how we like to communicate and how we like to open up spaces and the pace that we can work at, is really interesting to see what happens. And 113 people give you that feedback, not me. 113 people are giving feedback and saying, I want to be part of something that I really haven't heard of yet. And by hearing, I mean they haven't heard this before. They've seen the visuals, they've read the words, they've followed the posts, and now they've clicked the link and they've gone through and they've introduced themselves. And many still have not. And whatever that is in human design and human nature. So we have to, I believe we have to go through a period of time to re-educate people in terms of how you engage in community online and how you have that nearness of dialogue. And that's part of the impetus to create this podcast, is to have this nearness between what biomimicry works is, what biomimicry is, but also what it can be for people. Because really what it is whatever people ask the questions about and whatever people pose the problems or the solutions to. And then how is it that we can work together in subgroups, sub-communities, sub-networks to be able to feed back and communicate back to the whole? So biomimicry works for social innovation. Biomimicry works for aesthetic design. All of these areas have been covered in even the 2 magazines that we've published and put together.
I really like that you're touching on this. It's almost as if when we say biomimicry is only this, it is only this. It actually tells us that it can also be all of that. If it's only this for now, all of that is still waiting. And I only really got to understand what I'm speaking about now, the this and the that, when I met Lex Amore. And, when I was introduced to biomimicry in the beginning of my journey, there was a very, very strong theme of architecture and design and biology and chemistry and sort of like very set fields that would use biomimicry. And it was really difficult to get your head around the outcome, the application, But whenever you were in the process, when you would look at life's principles, for example, it would feel so alive. It will feel so connected. Everything just felt so, I don't know, different once you integrate it into your own life and your own expertise. But then there was the box at the end that would say, no, but it can't be because biomimicry has to be this or that as a traditional sense. But then in the second iteration of the magazine, when Lex took life's principles and she took biomimicry and she flawlessly, like just in the most beautiful way, integrated that into her healing and how biomimicry can be part of healing. Um, that was just fascinating to me. And this has been, I think, one of the strongest themes that came out through our community within Biomimicry Works on school is that people were resonating with mimicking nature, mimicking life, bios and mimesis, and saying, but I want to really mimic life through what is really alive within me. So whether I'm working in community or in farming or in fashion design or in food or healing or communication or media design, no matter what it was, art, um, I, I I feel alive when I connect with the work that is encapsulated within biomimicry. And I think the community is really emulating a gap. And when there's a gap, nature will go and fill that gap, right? And I think this is just what is naturally happening, is that it's bringing together the that, not the this, right? And I'm excited about that. I'm excited to be in this process and to say, okay, let's just see where, for example, the slime mold will go. Where is this path going? Where is this moving ecosystem going to? Like what is this? Like,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I kind of relate the this and that. So this would be the head or the mind, and that would be the heart. And for, well, there's one thing that we know very well, and that's education and non-traditional education. So heart education, progressive education, that's what we do. And what you're touching on there is biomimicry through the human story. And that is something which has yet to be really, really fully leveraged in terms of how potent it is. Now, you don't have to understand from a mind space someone's story. If you try and use your mind to really analyze and cross-reference every single thing, say if you're talking about Lex's story, which is really such an amazing, inspiring, touching story, if you were trying to analyze it through your mind, then you'd get one version of the story. But when you actually read, and maybe I can share the screen a little bit later on,
Yeah.
when you actually read through the article, you'll find that your mind actually turns off and your heart opens. And that's the gift of how I see biomimicry through the human story. And I don't have to understand it from a headspace to be moved by that. And my heart has a different intelligence. And being able to open spaces like that for people, to be able to publish someone's story like that with visuals and words directly from the source. And whenever I send something to someone who wants to contribute to the articles, I send a very loose framework of 150 to 300 words, but it must be something which is living, loving, and breathing within you. That's the only thing. And I don't really change anything. We don't really change anything. We look at the design and we put it together. So that is a tremendously powerful position to be in. It's an incredible uh, ability to respond that we have. And does that make money? Well, not yet. But the intention is not to, because the story comes first. And the relationship of how biomimicry interweaves with someone's story and their professional, personal development, their growth, is something which is worth sharing, don't you think?
Yeah, totally. I think it's Dr. Sindhu who wrote
Yeah.
one of the articles. Oh my gosh. Like I've just been watching her posting it on LinkedIn and seeing so many people congratulating her. And
Mm.
I just thought about that. I thought about the fact that people could like share and be grateful and happy and celebrate with her. And I'm just watching her comments as she is like really paying gratitude back to people that are saying, we really see you. We are happy with you. We recognize you. And I just look at that and I think, wow. Um, but recently somebody said to me, and this was really interesting, and I'm really curious. I haven't even mentioned this to you. So somebody said to me, well, biomimicry is one thing, but what it actually is that it's warm data. And I I paused and I said, okay, I hear you. Again, I'm not somebody for making things binary. I really love a binary analogy because then it again tells me what it is in between. So if we have biomimicry on the one side and we have warm data on the other side, it actually tells me it's everything in between. It is that space in between. It's another interconnected part of the system. So I know Nora Bateson works with warm data, and this was kind of the lens that this person came from. And I don't know, what do you think about that?
I think there's interconnected threads through most things. It's just the human mind and the human intellect that wants to put divides in between everything. So, where I've always spoken, like what you said before, I've always spoken about the space between.
Mm.
And even in some of Nora Bateson's work and her father's work, it's all about that space between. It's really untouchable. It's indescribable. It's really a sacred space. It's almost like nature's sacred space from humanity, if you like. So I'm not for compartmentalizing biomimicry, regeneration, sustainability, warm data, polycrisis, metacrisis. You can argue about all of those things, but at the essence of it all, what are you actually doing to get closer to another in order to understand another better, in order to what the indigenous people to this day still know best is to honor story, because within story is infinite wisdom that's accessible to everyone, regardless of intellect, regardless of education, regardless of place, space, time, age, race. It's story. So doing this is part of sharing our story from a non-commercial point of view, leading the way into the unknown and opening space for other people. And you can see that in terms of physics when you actually like zoom into a new space or you shut a door really, really fast. It creates this vacuum, and this vacuum gets sucked up into it. And that's what I really like. I really like being able to create. I really like being able to open space. So in terms of warm data, yeah, it's warm data.
I really appreciate that. Um, and I appreciate hearing your perspective, and I appreciate being able to listen. If anything, this is what I'm really learning to appreciate more. That the more I listen, the more I'm actually learning, and the more I'm actually filled with gratitude and appreciation. Um, so I think it's important to have these conversations. That I know a long time ago, we used to talk about education is not about who wins. It's not a competition. And I think in this whole beautiful, beautiful, diverse body of work and movement of looking at the world and people and nature and relationships and just all of these things, none of it has to be in competition with each other. It doesn't. They're actually just all beautifully interconnected. And I think once again, this is something that Biomimicry Works from a non-commercial community point is trying to push forward and foster and open up a space where it's open for even people who are not in these worlds or who are not in these dialogues yet. Um, but but they know, they can feel that there is an interconnected place or energy that's pulling them in to say, hey, here's a community that shares curiosity, and it shares a love for nature, and it shares passion for story, and it shares and honors, individual voice, and how the individual voice actually shapes the collective architecture.
Yeah, the word complementary comes to mind,
Nice.
and I think you know, we've had discussions with Biomimicry for Social Innovation. We've had discussions with Biomimicry Institute. We are complementary to the system by default because it's in our design as human beings. Um, and if anyone's threatened by that, well, then there's some introspection for other people in other places. And for us to be complementary, we have to first become sustainable before we become regenerative. So, you know, it's really important for us to also be open to partnerships, to be open to be supported, to be open to other industries and other networks who want to feed into Biomimicry Works, because it does take capital, it does take time, it does take, a whole lot of expertise to be able to put, something like a podcast together, something like a magazine together. And, there's the sort of things that we want to be able to sustain ourselves first, sustain the system first. But then the greater goal is for it to be an absolute regenerative system where we're looking at micro-funding initiatives through community members, which are actually happening. Thinking about Lee over there in the
Philippines.
Philippines,
Mm.
an amazing, amazing project which is happening that could do with some funding. And not a lot of funding would go a long way. We know that from our work throughout Southeast Asia as well, throughout Africa. So we also have to be open to the community supporting us, open to the corporates and the partnerships supporting us too. And I guess this is also a direct call out to say, if our content, if this message hits somewhere within you, within your industry, entity, institution, business, then let's talk, because we want this to be far, far beyond, ourselves. And we know that we have to open up in terms of partnerships and to be really, really complementary to the community, to also be financially viable and to be able to pass on those funds as well. That's a big aim. Now maybe we could look at crowdfunding or something like that, but I'm just kind of touching on that point.
Yeah, because I think there's always someone looking to do good somewhere. And within this community, there are a lot of people who will be able to do a lot of good with that impulse. I'm even thinking of Charles over in Uganda, and I'm thinking of Diksha over in, India. And we see these people, we hear these people with beautiful initiatives doing beautiful work. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so you can find our work on biomimicry.works, so www.biomimicry.works, and I've embedded the Iteration 2 magazine there, so you'll be able to go through, see Lex's story. It's a nice kind of digital design, and it's also on LinkedIn. You can go back and see Iteration 1, and see who Charles is over there in Uganda doing some amazing things. And yeah, look out for our Instagram at Biomimicry Works, on LinkedIn as well. And you can look up Peter Phillips on LinkedIn, Dr. Nicolene on LinkedIn also.
Awesome. So I really look forward to hearing some community members on the next podcast. And I think
I
it's
think Byron
just,
has to be first, huh?
oh, awesome. He's like the mascot.
Yeah.
It's really cool having someone like Byron bringing the heart and the soul and the passion and the dedication and the willingness. And then you have somebody like Lex that brings the resilience and the courage and the communication, and you bring somebody like Jan Peter who brings like the community and the curiosity and just the inclusiveness. And I can just go through so many names of people and how everybody just brings like really something so, so beautiful. I know there's people who I haven't mentioned now, and that we haven't mentioned, even that are in Iteration 1 and Iteration 2, and that's in the community and all of that. But I think the best is to jump on school, to be in the community, to meet the people, to listen to the podcast, to just immerse yourself. Because if there's one thing that I've learned in my life, is that the best way to actually retain all learning is to fully, fully immerse yourself in it. So I think Biomimicry Works is a very good space to just jump in, get yourself fully immersed in like everything, vertically, horizontally, into the fourth dimension, however you want to say it or do it. But it's right there. Everything is just right there because it's built by people, for people, and it lives through people. So yeah, I think it's just awesome. And thanks, Peter, for setting up and just taking, the time and just the patience, how you always take the aesthetics and just all the little bits and pieces into consideration to actually start the podcast. Because somebody always needs to go first. And yeah, I think it's really awesome just to give a shout out for you for going first and for opening up this wave of communication for so many others.
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure. And I think the next however many, because I did put a post up a few weeks ago about who wants to see a biomimicry podcast, and it kind of got inundated.
Woo-hoo.
So I've got a list to go through. And I think it's going to be a nice visual anthropology, which has a home in Biomimicry Works, but it also lives and breathes wherever it roams online. And that is a huge, huge honor because there is no end goal. It's just a continuation of what has been before. And how can we transform that into the future that we want to create? And Biomimicry Works is a representation of that. And I am a custodian of that. And that's my responsibility. So if I need to get on and create things without anyone giving me permission, just getting through my own stuff and getting through my own excuses, then so be it, because what we've done already is evidence there needs to be more of it. And it's not more hot air, and it's not more arguments over is it warm data or is it this or that's not that and that's not this and I'm in this faction and I'm in this faction and I'm going to argue over your point. And it's none of that. It's just the truth. And the truth is the truth of someone's story. So on that note, again, you can find us on all different social links, Biomimicry Works, and please engage with us. It's we do things from the heart, and they speak a different way. So we'll continue improving quality and things over time, but we'd appreciate any feedback, any support that you have. And yeah, let's think about some crowdfunding options that we can open it up to be able to fund the online platform and things like that, which I think would be a wonderful way which people can, even behind the scenes, contribute and give back to create a sustainable system first, and hopefully very rapidly move into a regenerative system.